God put you in the narcissist's life for a reason. God never places purpose without intention, and he never sends light where it is not needed. If you found yourself entangled in the life of a narcissist, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a calling. You weren't sent there to be broken, but to be bold. You were not placed in their life to lose yourself, but to reveal something they could not see: truth, love, and conviction. God uses vessels, not victims. And sometimes the most powerful assignments are hidden in the most painful connections. This is not just about surviving them, it's about discovering why you were strong enough to be placed there in the first place. Purpose always precedes presence. If you're in their life, you were assigned, not accident. There are no accidents in the kingdom of God, only assignments. If you have found yourself in the life of a narcissist, someone who is consumed with self, blinded by pride, and manipulates love to feed their ego, you need to understand one eternal truth. God does not place his people in chaos without a kingdom reason. Before you entered their life, your presence was already written into a divine script. Long before you ever met them, before they smiled at you, praised you, devalued you, or confused you with charm and control, God had a plan with your name on it. You were not random. You were not unlucky. You were sent. Purpose always precedes presence. That means wherever you are, there is something in you that God wanted to place there. When God assigns a person to a place or relationship, he doesn't consult the comfort of the vessel. He consults the necessity of the mission. And sometimes that mission is wrapped in pain. Sometimes it is hidden inside difficult people, people who reject correction, people who love the spotlight but hide their scars, people who draw others in with charisma but destroy them with cruelty. God saw the narcissist's need before they ever saw your value. He knew they would resist truth, but he also knew you carried it. He knew they would try to dominate you, but he also knew you were built to stand, not break. The enemy wants you to believe you were a victim of misjudgment or weakness. He wants you to feel like you made a mistake, like you gave your heart to the wrong person, or trusted someone who wasn't worthy, but God sees it differently. While it's true that narcissists are masters of deception and manipulation, it's also true that God uses what the enemy meant for harm to train his vessels for purpose. Your discernment is being sharpened, your identity is being tested, and your voice, which may have been silent for a season, is being stirred to speak with authority. You see, we often pray for purpose as if it only comes in platforms and peace. But purpose is often hidden in conflict. Purpose grows in the pressure of the assignment. When you're in a place where love is twisted and truth is punished, that's where purpose becomes a sword, and that's what you are carrying whether you feel it or not. You are a sword in the spirit, an instrument of divine disruption. You didn't come into their life to applaud their illusions. You were sent to confront the darkness with your light, not by arguing or fighting, but by simply being what God made you to be, a reflection of his character and his truth. Understand this. God didn't send you to be consumed. He sent you to be a contrast. The narcissist may not change because of you, but they can't stay comfortable around you. Either your presence confronts their need for control. Your honesty disrupts their web of manipulation. Your love, when pure, exposes their counterfeit. Even in your silence, something in you speaks loudly to what they've tried to hide. That is why the conflict felt so intense. That's why your identity came under attack, because purpose always attracts pressure. The devil doesn't fight who he isn't threatened by. He saw your assignment before you even understood it. Let this sink in. You were assigned. Before the foundation of the world, God knew you could handle this test. He didn't send someone weak to stand in front of someone broken. He sent someone strong, strong enough to endure, strong enough to grow, and strong enough to eventually walk away when it's time, with your purpose still intact. God doesn't put light in a place for it to be extinguished. He puts light in darkness so the darkness has no excuse. You were a witness in that place, a witness of love, a witness of truth, a witness of what healthy humanity and divine identity look like. You're not the answer to their problems, but you may have been the evidence that God still cares about them. You were the signal that change is possible, that healing is available, and that grace still knocks even on the doors of prideful hearts. Whether they received it or rejected, it is not your burden to carry. Your assignment was to be there, carry the truth with humility, and grow through what tried to destroy you. That in itself is a powerful fulfillment of purpose. So no, your presence wasn't accidental. You didn't stumble into their life. You were assigned, and even if it hurt, even if it confused you, even if it drained you, understand that God was working through you. He placed you there because He trusted you, and now, as He leads you out or forward, He's adding layers to your purpose that you could never have received in comfort. Your presence was proof of heaven's plan, and that plan will not be wasted. God plants light in darkness, not to blend in, but to expose, correct, and transform. Light does not ask permission to shine. It simply exists, and its very presence exposes what the darkness tried to hide. When God planted you in the life of a narcissist, He didn't do it so you could become like them. He placed you there because the darkness they lived in had grown too comfortable, too deceptive, too normal, and when darkness becomes normal, light must arrive to disrupt it. You were not called to blend in with dysfunction. You were called to stand in it with a different spirit. God sends His light not just to illuminate, but to agitate, not to destroy the person, but confront the system of lies that has held them captive, and He chose you to carry that light. The narcissist thrives in environments where truth is buried and self is exalted. They manipulate, control, and twist reality to maintain a false image of superiority and perfection. But God sees through the mask. He is not impressed with performance. He is not moved by prideful pretenses. He is a God of truth, and when He sends light into a life like that, it is because He is ready to deal with what has been hidden too long. You were never sent into that situation to lose yourself trying to please someone who cannot be pleased. You were sent to reflect the nature of the one who sent you, full of grace, full of truth, and unwilling to compromise righteousness for the sake of comfort. Understand this: your very presence in their life disrupted something. It may not have looked dramatic, but spiritually it was seismic. Because when light enters a dark room, everything hiding in the shadows is suddenly revealed. Your compassion uncovered their selfishness. Your honesty challenged their deceit. Your consistency frustrated their chaos. You didn't even have to preach. The way you loved, the way you forgave, the way you stayed kind when they were cruel, these were weapons of light. The narcissist may have tried to control you, silence you, or confuse you, but what they were really reacting to was the unsettling power of light they couldn't explain and couldn't control. God never sends light without a purpose. Light is His tool for correction, not condemnation, but correction. There's a difference. Condemnation pushes people away from truth. Correction invites them to change. That's what your presence was doing. You were a silent invitation to a better way. You were evidence that God still pursues even the most prideful heart. But understand this: not everyone who sees the light wants to be changed by it. Some people love darkness more than truth, because truth demands repentance. And that's why the narcissist resisted you. Not because of who you are, but because of what you represented. You brought light, and light will always challenge lies. In trying to love them, you may have questioned yourself. You may have wondered if you were the problem, if you were too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional. But no, what you were was light, and light, by its very nature, cannot be passive in the presence of lies. It shines, it reveals, it convicts. That's why they try to dim you. That's why they twisted your words, questioned your motives, and minimized your value. Because if they could distort your light, they could remain comfortable in their shadow. But remember this, no amount of darkness can put out a light that God has lit. Sometimes we misunderstand our assignment because we equate impact with acceptance. But the truth is, Jesus himself was rejected not because he lacked love, but because he carried truth. He was the light of the world, and yet the world rejected him. So if your presence brought discomfort, if your honesty caused conflict, if your boundaries were treated as betrayal, don't let that shake you. It means the light was working. It means God was moving. It means your spirit was doing exactly what it was designed to do. But let's go deeper. God doesn't just send light to expose. He sends it to transform. If the narcissist ever humbles themselves, if they ever allow the truth to pierce their defenses, it will be because your presence planted seeds of transformation. Maybe they'll never tell you. Maybe you'll never see the change firsthand. But seeds don't need applause to grow. They need light. You were that light. You brought a glimpse of something real, something godly, something powerful into a heart that has long been locked away in pride and fear. Whether they responded or not is between them and God, but your obedience to be there, to shine, to not fold into their dysfunction, that is what heaven saw. You weren't planted in darkness to be overtaken. You were planted to overcome. You were sent as a divine disruption, as a reminder that God still sends messengers into messes and light into lies. Don't let the pain of your assignment cause you to forget its purpose. You were chosen to reflect his nature where it was least expected, not to become like them, but to reveal what they could become through him. You were not there to fix them. That's God's job. You were there to carry light. And light, even when unwelcomed, always leaves a mark. Your pain is not punishment, it's preparation for purpose in hostile territory. Pain has a language, a sound, and a weight, but in the hands of God, pain also has purpose. When you were placed in the life of a narcissist, you did not walk in punishment, you walked into preparation. It didn't feel like it. It felt like rejection. It felt like confusion. It felt like walking on glass while smiling through emotional warfare. But what you didn't see in those moments of anguish was that God was building something inside of you that comfort alone could never produce. He was preparing you not to be broken, but to be battle-tested, not to be silenced, but to be strengthened, because the assignment you carry is not for safe places, it's for sacred confrontations in hostile territory. Too often, we equate difficulty with divine disapproval. We think, if God loved me, why would he let me suffer here? But love doesn't always protect you from pain, it prepares you through it. God knew what you were walking into when that narcissist entered your life. He knew how charming they would seem in the beginning, how quickly you'd be drawn into their world, and how slowly the emotional erosion would begin. He knew they would distort your identity, drain your peace, and make you question your worth. But he also knew what he put inside of you, and he knew that the fire you walked through would not burn you. It would refine you. This was never about the narcissist alone. This was about the deeper layers of who you are and what you're called to carry. God often allows his strongest warriors to be trained in the most intense battlegrounds, not to destroy them, but to discipline them in discernment, endurance, and identity. Narcissistic abuse has a way of stripping you down to your core. It tests your ability to love yourself when someone else refuses to. It forces you to confront the parts of you that needed validation, needed to be seen, needed to be chosen. And when those needs go unmet, you have two choices: break apart or break through, and that is where God met you. You see, pain in hostile territory is not random. It is strategic. It causes you to dig deeper, pray harder, and ask questions you never would have asked in comfort. It is in that emotional warfare that you begin to hear God clearly, because when someone tries to erase you, God steps in to reintroduce you to yourself. You begin to realize that your worth was never based on how well you could be loved by a broken person. Your value is not up for negotiation in the hands of manipulators. What was taken from you emotionally is not the end, it's the soil for something sacred. Out of that very pain, God births clarity, calling, and conviction. The tears you cried were not wasted. They were watering something in you. Every silent night, every time you had to hold your tongue to keep peace, every moment you questioned your reality because of their gaslighting, God was there. He saw it, and while He allowed it, He never abandoned you in it. He stood by, not indifferent, but intentional. Sometimes God doesn't stop the storm. He strengthens you to walk through it so that when you come out, you'll know you're more than a survivor. You're a soldier, a vessel that's been tested and now ready for greater use. Don't mistake the fire as punishment. Think of Joseph in the prison, David in the cave, Esther in the palace under pressure, or Jesus in the wilderness. Preparation never feels pretty. It feels like isolation, betrayal, and uncertainty, but it's producing something deep, something unshakable. That's what happened to you. While the narcissists thought they were winning by breaking you down, God was quietly building you up. Every time you didn't retaliate, every time you chose grace over vengeance, every time you stayed rooted in truth, you were being trained in kingdom resilience, and that training wasn't for nothing. Now you carry something you didn't have before, insight. You can spot manipulation now. You know what real love feels like because you've experienced its counterfeit. You recognize spiritual warfare disguised as charm. You have spiritual muscles that were formed under pressure, and they are strong. You have the kind of compassion that only pain can produce, and a voice that can now reach others walking through what you once thought would destroy you. Purpose isn't always revealed in peaceful seasons. Often it's hidden in painful ones. That narcissists didn't derail your calling, they awakened it. They didn't silence your voice, they sharpened it. And now, with scars that testify and strength that endures, you are not only coming out of that experience, you're coming out equipped. Your pain was preparation, not for a life of fear, but for a life of fire, fire that refines, fire that protects, fire that now burns in you. So, lift your head, wipe your tears, stop rehearsing what they did to you, and start remembering what God did in you. The pain was never punishment. It was the proving ground of your purpose. You were being trained for hostile territory, not to retreat, but to rise. You were sent as a mirror, not a servant, to reflect truth, not to be broken by their ego. There is a profound difference between being sent to serve and being sent to reflect. In the case of your placement in the life of a narcissist, God did not assign you to bow, bend, or break under the pressure of their ego. He did not send you to become a servant to their self-obsession or a slave to their emotional demands. You were not sent there to be molded by their moods or redefined by their rejection. You were sent as a mirror, and mirrors don't conform, they reflect. You were called to be a clear, unfiltered, unshakable reflection of truth, light, and identity in an environment where distortion had become the norm. The narcissist thrives in a world constructed by illusions, one where they are always right, always admired, always innocent, and always the center. They craft a reality built on deception, charm, and control, where others are manipulated to become extensions of their ego. But when God sends someone like you into their life, He does so with the intent to interrupt the lie. You become the mirror they can't avoid, not because you're confrontational, but because you're authentic. Your consistency, your vulnerability, your integrity, they all reflect something their false world cannot contain. Truth. Mirrors don't speak, yet they say everything. They don't fight, yet they challenge. That's why your presence provoked such strong reactions. Because a narcissist cannot control a mirror, they can only try to shatter it. And when you wouldn't let their manipulation reshape your identity, when you refused to abandon your values to keep their favor, when you stood firm in your boundaries and your truth, they began to see a version of themselves they could not tolerate. You became the evidence that their self-created image was just that, created. You reflected the reality they tried so hard to avoid, and that made you dangerous to their false kingdom. But here's what you must hold on to. You were never there to be broken by their reactions. You were not assigned to accommodate their dysfunction. You were sent to reflect what they needed to see, even if they hated the reflection. It was never your job to fix them, heal them, or rescue them from their patterns. You were the messenger, not the miracle worker, and sometimes the most powerful message God sends into someone's life is not a loud voice. It's a living example. You were that example, a living, breathing contradiction to their lies, a soul that refused to lose its shape just to be accepted. Yes, it hurt. Yes, there were moments you questioned your own worth because of how they treated you. Yes, you wondered if being good, kind, honest, and forgiving was worth it in a place where none of it was reciprocated. But even in those moments of doubt, you remained a mirror, and every time they tried to shift blame onto you, your very nature silently testified to the opposite. Every time they twisted narratives to make you the villain, your consistent love and honesty exposed the manipulation. Every attempt to rewrite history fell flat in the presence of your integrity. The danger in being a mirror is that you often absorb the rage meant for themselves. The narcissist is at war with their own emptiness, but because they can't face it, they turn on the ones who reflect it. That's why you felt like the enemy when all you tried to do was love them. That's why your truth was punished and your silence was used against you. But what they feared was not your voice. It was your clarity. Clarity threatens control, and you, simply by being real, disrupted a system that relies on confusion. Let me say this plainly. You were not sent to serve their ego, but to expose the wounds behind it. You didn't come to enable their image, but to confront it with truth, and even if they rejected that truth, it doesn't mean your assignment failed. Mirrors don't fail when people refuse to look. They still shine, they still reflect, and they remain unchanged by the refusal of others to acknowledge what they see. The world will try to convince you that love means sacrifice without limits, that to love someone broken, you must break yourself too. But kingdom love has boundaries. God's love tells the truth. God's love stands firm, and God's love does not ask you to become less so someone else can feel more. The narcissist wanted a servant, someone who would agree, obey, and admire without question, but God sent them a mirror, someone who loved them enough to remain honest, even when it cost you connection, and that is the highest kind of love, love with backbone. You may not have received the love you gave, you may have been discarded, devalued, or disrespected, but that doesn't make you foolish. It makes you faithful. You remained true in the face of falsehood. You stayed soft in the presence of cruelty. You held your peace when war was declared on your soul. That is strength. That is purpose. And that is the mark of someone God trusts deeply. So now what? Now you heal. Now you recognize that being a mirror is not about staying in toxic places forever. It's about fulfilling your part and knowing when to step away. You showed them who they were, and more importantly, you discovered who you are. You are not what they said about you. You are not the projections they cast upon you. You are not weak, needy, or too much. You are a truth bearer, an atmosphere shifter, a light in a very dark place. And now that your assignment is complete or shifting, you walk away not in defeat, but in dignity. You were never called to be a servant to their ego. You were called to be a mirror of divine identity. Someone who reflected heaven's standard in a place that desperately needed to see it. Whether they changed or not is not your responsibility. You were faithful, and heaven honors that faithfulness. Even when it goes unseen by man, walking away wasn't failure. It was fulfillment of your assignment and the beginning of your freedom. Walking away can feel like defeat, especially when you've poured your heart into someone who never truly saw you. When you've given grace after grace to a narcissist who saw your kindness as weakness and your love as an opportunity to exploit. It can feel like you've lost, like you weren't strong enough, like if you had done just one more thing, said it better, prayed harder, maybe they would have changed. But hear this clearly. Walking away was not your failure, it was your freedom. It wasn't the collapse of your mission, it was the conclusion of it. In the kingdom of God, endings are not always signs of brokenness. Sometimes they are signs of completion. You didn't fail by leaving, you fulfilled the assignment you were given, and in fulfilling it, you stepped into a new realm of clarity, healing, and divine purpose. See, God never asks you to stay in a place where your spirit is being crushed just to appear faithful. He doesn't equate endurance with abuse. He doesn't confuse loyalty with losing yourself. When he places you in someone's life, it is always with a time, a purpose, and a boundary. And when that boundary is crossed repeatedly, when your identity is threatened, your peace is stolen, and your worth is diminished, it's not rebellion to leave. It's obedience to the voice of God that says, enough. You've done what I sent you to do. The moment you walked away, you didn't abandon them, you released them, and in doing so, you reclaimed yourself. The world often celebrates staying no matter the cost, as if perseverance means self-destruction. But God is not impressed with sacrifices that leave his children emotionally bankrupt. Your heart was never meant to be an altar for someone else's ego. You weren't created to be a permanent supply for a soul unwilling to grow. Narcissists feed on endless access to your compassion, your strength, your forgiveness. But that's not love. That's codependency disguised as covenant. And when God opened your eyes to that truth, when the fog cleared and the patterns became undeniable, walking away wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. You see, walking away was the moment you aligned with heaven's verdict. It was the point at which your spirit caught up with what God had been whispering for a long time. You've stayed long enough. Now it's time to heal. There's nothing noble about staying in a battle that God has already delivered you from. You tried, you prayed, you forgave, you gave chance after chance, but they didn't change. Not because you didn't love enough, but because they didn't want to look in the mirror you held up. That's not your fault. Transformation requires surrender, and surrender cannot be forced. So you left, maybe physically, or maybe just emotionally at first. Maybe you're still untangling yourself from the mental web they spun. But even in that fragile, trembling step away, you honored God. You said, I will no longer betray myself to maintain what God has already released me from. That's not quitting, that's courage, that's faith in motion. That's what freedom looks like, and freedom doesn't come easy after such entanglement. The narcissist built a reality around their control, and when you disrupted it by leaving, they may have retaliated. They may have launched smear campaigns, weaponized your kindness, and tried to turn your departure into a narrative of your instability or ungratefulness. That's what they do, because they can't stand losing control. But their opinion doesn't define your healing. Their story doesn't erase your truth. You know what you endured. You know the emotional cost, and more importantly, God knows. He saw every tear, every silent scream, every internal war where you questioned your sanity. And when you walked away, heaven stood with you. You didn't just leave a person. You left a pattern. You walked away from confusion, from emotional manipulation, from spiritual entrapment, and in doing so, you chose alignment with peace over the illusion of connection. The breaking was real, but so was the breakthrough, because now you are becoming someone who no longer lives in survival mode. You are learning to breathe again, to laugh without guilt, to cry without shame. You're rediscovering the parts of you that had to go into hiding to coexist with dysfunction. You are not just free, you are being restored. Understand this. Your leaving also carries generational weight. Some assignments are not just about you. They are about breaking cycles. You were sent into that relationship, that environment, not only to shine a light, but to interrupt a lineage of control, fear, and silence. When you walked away, you didn't just free yourself. You set a precedent for those who come after you. You showed your children, your community, even your younger self, that love does not require losing your voice, that boundaries are holy, that healing is possible. You may not have all the closure. Narcissists rarely give it. They don't apologize sincerely. They don't own their impact. But closure is not something they give you. It's something you create with God, and walking away was the beginning of that creation. It was the moment you said, I will no longer participate in my own wounding. I am worthy of peace. I am worthy of truth. I am worthy of a life that reflects the love I so freely give. That's what freedom sounds like, and you're walking in it now. Yes, there will be days when grief visits, when you miss the hope of what could have been, when the memories come back not in anger, but in sadness. That's normal. You're not just mourning a person, you're mourning the version of yourself who kept believing they would change. You're letting go of the fantasy and embracing the reality, and in that process, you are healing at a deeper level than you ever thought possible. Walking away didn't diminish your love. It proved its depth, because real love includes yourself. Real love doesn't tolerate abuse under the mask of faithfulness. Real love walks away when staying means spiritual death. You didn't fail. You finished. You stood up. You reclaimed your voice. You reconnected with God in a way only that kind of pain could produce. And now you're not just free. You're whole. So don't look back in regret. Look back in reverence. You survived what tried to erase you. You held on to your truth when lies were easier. You walked through fire and came out gold. You were not disobedient. You were discerning. You weren't weak. You were wise. And in walking away, you didn't just exit a toxic connection. You entered a sacred season of becoming who you were before the trauma, becoming who God always knew you were. This was not your end. It was your exodus. Welcome to freedom.